Hi guys, my name is Brooklyn and I am currently 17 years old. I found out I was pregnant with twins when I was 16 and I was very, very scared to tell my mom, and at the time I was living with my grandma. So I had my grandma tell my mom for me because I was chicken and I was way too scared to tell her because she is a very firm believer in you get married and you have kids and blah 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 blah. And plus I was still in high school and I was pregnant. um, so I went to my first doctor's appointment and they determined that they did like the heartbeat monitor and they said that they couldn't find a heartbeat. So I was probably too early to be hearing the heart rate. So they sent me over to the clinic that actually does ultrasounds. And I had this gut feeling. I had told my now husband, then boyfriend, that I was very, very scared that I was having twin boys. And he was like, there's no way, like, hiccup, sorry, there's no way. All that runs in my family is singles. Like, you can't be pregnant with twins. And I was like, well, twins run in my family more common than not. And so we went, and as soon as she did the ultrasound, I saw that there was two babies. Very, very obvious. They kind of looked like turtles at first, so that was very scary. I'll try and insert some pictures of the ultrasounds. And so we went on, and I went out into the waiting room because the ultrasound place that I went to didn't allow anyone in, so I was in there by myself. So I went out into the lobby, and I looked at my mom and my grandma and my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, I'm having twins. And I showed them the ultrasound pictures, and they were shocked. My grandma was like, I figured you were having twins, and my mom was still pretty mad at me at that time, so she was just like, okay, and I was like 5 weeks and 6 days, and I was already showing. At the time that I found out I was pregnant, I was 98 pounds, and I immediately started showing. I mean, I had like this little pooch, and my grandma said she had already had the gut feeling that I was pregnant because I could eat ice cream like crazy. Like, that was my favorite thing, mint chocolate chip ice cream. And we went and got some ice cream a few days before I told everyone, and I threw it up. So she had the assumption that I was pregnant, but she didn't want to assume and be wrong and then make me feel bad, because I had told everyone me and my boyfriend were not having sex, that we were not sexually active, that there was no way that I could be pregnant, like, just to leave me alone about everything. And so a few weeks down the road, I started, like, the morning sickness started going away, but I was like 12 weeks when I started, like, not contracting, but I started having some really bad lower abdominal pains. So I went into the ER, and I was like, I'm 12 weeks pregnant with twins, and they just dismissed it and were like, oh, it's just ligament pain, you're fine. So I was like, okay. Didn't think it was too bad, but it was definitely where I could not walk. I got put on bed rest pretty early on because my torso is smaller than most people's, so they didn't want me to have any risk of going into labor prematurely. So they put me on bed rest, and I went to my 16-week ultrasound, and I found out that I was having boys, and I told my husband, I was like, I told you. And I had to see a specialist and a normal OB, because my specialist does not deliver, but my OB does, so I had to keep both and go to both. So I had 2 appointments every single week until I was like 16 weeks, or every other week. And I went to my specialist like 4 days later, and she was checking everything out, and she was like, oh my gosh, your babies look great. And then she goes, oh my goodness. And she said, hold on. And I was so scared. My mom was in the room, my grandma was in the room, and I think my husband's mom was in the room, and I freaked out. No, my mom wasn't in the room because she later on got called, and I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And the doctor, the actual doctor, comes in, the specialist, and he goes, yep, that's definitely a third baby. Congratulations, you're having triplets. And I was like, what? There's no way. Like, I'm 16. I cannot be having triplets. There's no way. So he was like, well, there definitely is. You can't see it because baby B is blocking it, but you definitely have a baby in there. And I was like, oh, okay. So I called my husband because he was at work, and I was like, I'm pregnant. And he was like, I know. And I was like, but wait, I'm pregnant with 3 babies. And I did not even know about the third baby. Like, I was so shocked. And then at 17 weeks, I started having some really, really bad pain. I had already been moved into my mom's because they told me I needed to stay close to the hospital just in case anything happened, because I was in my later stage of pregnancy and I needed to be super careful with everything. So my mom lived near the hospital, so we moved in with her, and I started contracting. I woke up at 4 in the morning and I wasn't sure if it was contractions or not. So I just laid there and I didn't really do anything, but I could feel my stomach like tightening up and then releasing. And I was so scared. So I looked at my husband because he was getting ready for work, and I was like, I think I'm going into labor. And he was like, no, like, you're crazy. You're only 16 weeks. I'm 17 weeks. You cannot be going into labor. And I was like, okay, you're probably right. And then they started getting closer. They went from like 15 minutes apart to 5 minutes apart in no time. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go and get checked out just to make sure, because I don't want to take any chances. We've already had like a rough pregnancy to start with, because I had been admitted into the hospital several times for ligament pain. And I was like, and I just have a feeling that something's wrong. And he was like, okay, well, I'll get ready for work, and if you have any issues or you are actually contracting, just call my boss and he'll let me off. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I went in to my mom's room and I was like, hey mom, I'm contracting. Like, I'm having really bad contractions. Like, they're not painful, but they are tightening up my body. And she goes, okay. So she got up and we immediately, my mom smokes, and which, whatever, but she smokes. And when she wakes up, she needs a cigarette, food, and she's ready. She's a procrastinator like me, getting up. Like, we don't want to get up and get rushed into doing things. And I was like, I'm so sorry to be waking you up. Like, if this isn't what it is, then I feel bad, because that's really pointless of us getting up and going to the hospital. So she told me to call labor and delivery, the hospital's labor and delivery, and see if they wanted me to go to the labor and delivery, or because I was only 17 weeks, or if they wanted me to go to the ER. And they said, no, come on in to labor and delivery. We'll get everything figured out, no big deal. And I was like, okay. So I went into labor and delivery, and we were literally 20 minutes from the hospital. My mom made it in like 10. She was worried because she had felt my stomach, and you could feel that, like, I was contracting, and it started getting really painful on the way to the hospital, but the contractions went down on the way to the hospital. Does that make sense? Like, I started cramping, but the contractions like went away. And then as soon as my mom pulled up, we had a person waiting there already with a wheelchair. I got in the wheelchair. They wheeled me into labor and delivery, and I was just in so much pain. By this time, the contractions had started again, and the pain was unbearable. And they gave me some medicine and were like, oh, it's not a big deal. You're fine. And then the contractions didn't go away, but they were like, they're just Braxton Hicks. Like, you're okay. And I had another appointment the next morning with my specialist, so I wasn't really too worried. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just going crazy. I've never had a baby before, much less 2 or 3. So maybe this is just me being crazy. Maybe it is just Braxton Hicks, and I'm just being a big baby. So I went home, and then I went to my specialist appointment, and she immediately started shaking her head, and she was like, we're gonna have to get the doctor in here. While she was doing the ultrasound, she was like, we're gonna have to get the doctor in here. I'm not really allowed to tell you anything, so I'm sorry, but we definitely have to go to the doctor and tell her what's going on. She was like, but don't worry, this sort of thing happens all the time. And I was like freaking out. I looked at my grandma, because my mom had to go to work, so my grandma came up and took me, and I just started crying. I was like, something's wrong. They probably didn't find a heartbeat. Something's wrong. And I was just hysterical. And my grandma was like, calm down, like, you're okay, everything's okay. She would tell you if they didn't find a heart rate. And so my doctor comes in, and she goes, I'm so sorry. She goes, nothing's wrong with the babies. The babies are healthy. They're thriving. They're big. They're measuring out what they need to be. And sighed of relief, like, was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for telling me that. But what's going on? Why is she so concerned? And she goes, your cervix, you're like 25% effaced, and you're dilated to a 3. I think I was at a 3 or a 4. And she goes, and you're contracting. And I said, yeah, I'm contracting. I went to the ER yesterday, but everything was fine. She was like, well, you're definitely contracting, and you're trying to have these babies. So we're going to do what's called a cerclage, but I won't talk to you until we get you admitted into the hospital. So I was like, okay. So they put me in labor and delivery, and she came in and she talked to me, and she was like, because literally, okay, I need to explain this so you understand, like, I didn't get transferred or anything. My specialist building is right here, and it's connected to the hospital. So all they had to do was put me on an elevator, send me downstairs, and I was in labor and delivery again. And she comes in and she's talking to me, and she tells me that a cerclage is something to sew your cervix so the baby doesn't try and come out anymore. Your cervix don't like, I may be wrong on this, I may be opposite. I think I'm right though. Your cervix is supposed to be like this, and opening means the baby's trying to come out. Like, this is the actual, like, vagina, like where the baby comes out, the vaginal canal. So I was already like this. So what the cerclage does is it comes around and it like sews this together, so it goes from this to this. And it's like a 10-minute procedure. Like, it's not long, it's not bad, but it was scary. And she told me that there was a risk of doing this surgery would be either her busting the water and the baby's having to come right then and there and not being viable, or there was a benefit where it works and everything is fine. So I looked at my husband and I was like, because he had been called and my mom had showed up and he had showed up, and I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, because either way I'm going to have these babies, whether we do the surgery or we don't. So the risk outweighs everything, you know. And so we did it. Well, she planned it for the next morning, so I was fasting. I could not eat anything all night, and let me tell you, it was like 2 in the afternoon when my appointment was over and I was in the hospital. I was so hungry because I hadn't had anything that morning, because I woke up at like 11. I was super, super tired the beginning of the pregnancy, and I woke up at 11, and then I could not eat because I had thrown up the one thing I had eaten. So I was just like, oh, we'll go to McDonald's or something after. No, that's not what happened. So she did the cerclage the next morning at like 9 in the morning, and everything went perfect. My husband got to go in there, since it wasn't like a big major surgery, it was a benign surgery, so he got to be there. I had to get a spinal tap, and that, everyone was like, oh my goodness, like, that's gonna hurt, and they did it and it didn't affect me. Like, my doctor was so good at what she did that it was just, everything was fine. I was very scared though. So 5 days later, I had a catheter in and everything, and bedside commode, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a toilet on the side of your bed because you cannot get up and do anything. From that point on, you're on strict bed rest. You can't get up and walk. You can't go to the table to eat. You can't sit up. You have to be laying down flat 24/7. You can sit up like a little bit, like your bed is like this. Like this is flat, sorry. I could sit up like that much to eat. Like not very much. So I finally got released 5 days after the cerclage, and I had to go home, and I was on strict bed rest. And August 3rd came along, and me and my husband got married, and it was beautiful. It was a backyard. I had to be sitting most of the time, but it was beautiful. She said I could stand up like 10 minutes out of the day to walk to the restroom, so I had saved everything. I didn't get up to pee much. I just stayed in bed all day, and then we got married, and it was just beautiful, and he's my best friend, and it was miraculous. I loved it. And then 20 weeks is how far along I was with the twins when I started contracting again. I was like, Mom, I woke her up again. I told her that we needed to go to the hospital. They sent us to L&D, and boom. I was told that my cervix was not working, and they were going to have to go and do an emergency, not cesarean, an emergency cerclage, and that the likelihood of it working was going to be slim to none, and if it did, I was going to be in the hospital the rest of my pregnancy, most likely. So I had the cerclage again, like immediately after I got into the hospital. There was no wait. They did the cerclage, and 7 days later, my doctor was like, you're doing really good, so we're going to do an ultrasound, see if your cervix is closed, and then I'm going to check you to see if you're dilated anymore, and if you're good, we're going to go send you home. So I was like, okay. So I did the second cerclage, and I already said that. And they thought that it would work, and they did the vaginal ultrasound, and it unfortunately hadn't. So she sent me from PCU to labor and delivery again, and she told me it was time to deliver my twins, most likely, that we would put me in Trendelenburg, which is where my head is down like this, and my feet are up in the air, so gravity holds the babies in. I got checked all the time, but my doctor specifically said, please do not check her vaginally because her water will break, because baby A's head is right there, and he's trying to come. So we just kind of waited. It was a wait and see game, and I lasted 2 weeks. I ended up having the twins at 22 weeks and 5 days. Not even 2 weeks, because 7 days had passed. I was 21 weeks. I made it 1 week in like 4 days or something. And so at 22 weeks and 5 days, I just kept saying, I feel like I have to push. I have never felt this urge so much. I have to push. So the doctor comes in and he checks me, and he's like, well, the baby's head is literally a knuckle deep, and you're getting an infection from your son, so we're going to have to deliver today. And he said, do you want to do a C-section or vaginal, because they're not viable. So whatever you want to do is what we'll do. And I started crying and begging them to please, please, please work with me. The NICU was like, we're not going to come. Like, there's no way they're going to make it. There's no way. So I got a book on grieving with the loss of a child, and I threw it away. I threw it at the doctor, and it landed in the trash can. And I was just very, very upset. Me and my husband were like, there's no way I'm not going to make it. Like, we need to at least try. So the NICU came up, and they were like, we'll try, and we'll attend your delivery, but the likelihood of them making it is slim to none. So I went into the delivery room. I did it vaginally because they said it was my choice, and I really didn't know if my twins were going to make it or not, and a C-section or vaginally wouldn't have done anything. So I delivered them, and I didn't get to see them. All I saw was the doctor pick my little baby up like this and carry sorry, and carry him into another room. And then I pushed again, and Clayton came out. Mason was first, Clayton came out, and they carried him into another room. And then I delivered the placenta because they were identical twins, they shared the same placenta. And then I delivered the third baby that was not viable at all. So 3 hours after that, my husband got to go in there and look at the babies and took some pictures, and both babies made it. So 3 hours after delivery, I finally got to meet my sons, Mason and Clayton, and they were thriving. They were doing so, so good. And unfortunately, the next day, August 17th or August 18th, Clayton did not make it. He had a brain bleed so bad that they couldn't even see his brain anymore. They tried to resuscitate him several times and they couldn't. And he just wasn't viable anymore. And so they pulled the plug, so to speak, and they handed me him, and I got to hold him as he took his last breaths. And my husband got to hold him, and we baptized him, and it was a very beautiful but sad moment. And I just kept praying, God, let me know he goes in peace. Let me know he has no pain and no heartache. Just please let me know. And little Clayton passed away with a smile on his face. So I definitely know God did something there. And I'm so thankful that God even allowed me to have a day with him, because I shouldn't have been allowed a day. He shouldn't have made it. So we planned his funeral, and by the grace of God, everyone was like, we'll do the cremation for free. We'll do the obituaries for free. Here's some free chairs so you can do it in the backyard and it can just be beautiful. So we did a beautiful ceremony, and a friend of ours, he's like, him and his wife had went through the same thing, not the same thing. They had a stillbirth, unfortunately, and he did an amazing ceremony. And she made me, his wife, made me this beautiful picture frame with all kinds of pictures of Clayton and us holding him and him with Mason, and it was just amazing. And then she also made this picture of just Mason for us, so we could always look at something upsetting but beautiful and meaningful, and then to see Mason. And we had his funeral August 26th, 2017, and it was just a beautiful ceremony. The weather was perfect, and the odds were in our favor that day, minus that we had lost our son. And Mason is now 5 months old. He's still in the NICU because he's got chronic lung disease. But I'm going to do a separate video because this is already a pretty long video. And I'm going to make it all about Mason and how he's doing. A little bit about Mason. He's 8 pounds. And he's big and he's gorgeous and he's handsome and I love him. But he's got chronic lung disease, so we're working on his lungs, and once his lungs are a little bit stronger, he'll get to come home. He'll probably come home on a oxygen tank or something. But that is my labor and delivery story, and a little bit about the death of my son, which sounds cruel, but he's my little angel. And this is a tattoo of him. This is Clayton with wings, and this is actually the size of his foot. My husband has gone fishing, and then his birthday and the day he passed, and then he has Clayton's handprint right here on his wrist, which I think is awesome. We compare Mason's feet to Clayton's feet all the time, and you can definitely see Clayton and Mason. So we also switched Mason's name from Mason Lawrence to Mason Clayton Lawrence. So if you guys want to know more, subscribe and follow my journey with Mason. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Bye, guys.